Hello, everyone, to Subtle Asian Book Club. We are so excited to be talking about our June book of the month, and we're really thrilled to be joined by the author herself, Alka Joshi. And we're going to give a brief introduction of ourselves, and then we'll jump right into it. So, my name is Tiffany. I'm one of the co hosts of Subtle Asian Book Club.
And I'm Alexandra, another co-host of Subtle Asian Book Club.
And as we mentioned before, we're here with the lovely author, Alka Joshi. So, just as a quick bio, Alka Joshi was born in India and raised in the US since the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and has an MFA from California College of Arts. At age 62, Joshi published her first debut novel, which is The Henna Artist, which is, of course, also our June book club pick. This book immediately became a New York Times bestseller, and many of us can understand why, a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and was long listed for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and is currently being developed into an episodic series by Netflix. The sequel, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, released in June 2021 and will be followed by a third book in the trilogy in 2023. So again, we're thrilled to have her here with us today. Why don't you just kick things off and let us chat with you?
Okay, terrific. So in 2009, I entered an MFA program in creative writing, and I was 51 at the time. And I entered that program for two reasons. One is that my husband had always been telling me all those years I was writing advertising and marketing materials. He said, I think you can write fiction. And so I finally decided to listen to him after 16 years and a slow learner that I am. And then the second reason that I entered the program is because there was that huge recession that came along in 2008. And I knew with every recession, as I ran my own advertising and marketing agency, with every recession, we had about a 2-year slowdown period. And then things would start ramping up again. So I thought, hey, this 2 years is perfect to enter a program like this. At the end of it, I'm bound to have the bare bones of a novel. And I think mostly I never enter anything without understanding what my end goal is going to be. I'm not one of those people who just sort of goes by the wind or whatever, that's a very Asian part of me. I need to know what the end goal is, and I need to work towards that end goal. So at the same time that I entered the program, I was also going to India a lot. And that was because my younger brother had bought a condo there. And so my mother said to me, will you take me there, and you can leave me there for months at a time because I'd like to stay longer. You come back and you finish off one of your semesters in California. So I said, okay. So as I was going there with my mother, I would have to stay there with her for several weeks at a time and then come back. And when I went to get her again, I would stay another several weeks with her. And it was, I think, more time that I had spent with my mother than I ever had in my life, really, because I was always in school. And at 18, I left home for good and, never came back once I went to college. So I had a chance to sort of get to know my mother on a different level. And as I got to know her and as I traveled through Jaipur with her, Jaipur, by the way, is a place where a lot of our extended family still live. So that's why my brother bought the condo there. And so, as I was going through there with her, she would point out the palace. And she told me about the time that she had an audience with the Maharani. She would take me to the bazaars, and she would show me the kinds of wedding jewelry that she would pick out were she a bride, today. And she told me about the wedding jewelry that my father's family gave to her that she never liked and never wore. And there's all of this like personal stuff that I didn't know anything about. And I started realizing that, my mother in all of her 70 years had really never had a life of her own, that she had always been at the behest of her family, and then my father, and then the three of us when we were born. And, she had an arranged marriage. She wasn't even capable or even knew about birth control. There wasn't anything like that. And so boom, 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 she has 3 kids in 4 years after marriage. And, forevermore, she's just always looking after other people. She never had a career. But I'm her only daughter. And I think that there was some part of her that thought, I want my daughter to be raised so differently from the way I've been raised. It's not right the way I've been raised. I think that women should have equality. my mother was always for women's equality. And whenever there were marches in Washington, or, in 1967, when we first came to this country, there was a lot going on about student rights and women's rights and end the Vietnam War. And there was a lot of protesting going on. And my mother saw all of this and she thought, wow, my kids can live in a very different country here than they could in India. This is a place where they can have a voice. Even children here have a voice. And so I thought, my mother has raised me to always stand up for myself, to always have my own career, to determine for myself whom I was going to marry and what I was going to do with my life. She didn't get to have that choice. And it's very courageous of her to have raised me so differently. A lot of immigrant women want to raise their daughters in their own images, not necessarily in a very different image. And so I just thought, I want to thank her for all of that independence that she gave me. And then this idea of Lakshmi being able to desert her marriage after 2 years, the way that I think my mother, in her wildest dreams, might have deserted her marriage just so she could live an independent life, just so she could make her own decisions. And that's exactly what Lakshmi ends up doing. And she creates this fabulous life for herself, a life in which she has to keep her own secrets in order to maintain that independence. But, it's a life for herself. And so I told my mother, I said, Mom, I'm writing this novel, and Lakshmi is really intended to be you in a fictional form. I'm giving you life in this fictional way. And my mother said, "Oh, okay, well, that's nice, honey." And then I asked her all kinds of questions about the art of henna and how often she'd had that done, because I remember as a kid in India watching every woman, practically every festival, women's hands were being decorated, and my mom, was no different. And she told me, she said, Alka, we are Brahmin, so we are not allowed to do henna. This is not something that, my father would have condoned. And so this is something that I don't know how Lakshmi as a Brahmin is getting to do henna. And I said, Mom, she has no other options. She has no education. She has no this, she has no that. So, she's doing the thing that she's seen every woman be able to do, be able to have on her hands. And she's got artistic skills. So let's, just kind of roll with me on this. And if she can do henna, then she can also, as a Brahmin, she can sit on the same divan as other ladies of that caste or a little bit lower caste. But she can also go into the kitchens and hang out with the domestic servants and get all of the secrets of the house. So she's able to straddle a lot of different classes. My mom said, okay, fine, it's your book. So I finished this book. It becomes my thesis. And at the end of my 2 years there, my mother died shortly thereafter. And it was very sudden, completely unexpected. And I really thought, okay, geez, I wrote this book for her as a thank you. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to continue it. And I couldn't. So I just put it aside. A year went by before my mentor called and said, hey, what are you doing with that book? Because, we all thought that thesis was fabulous and you should be able to, get that published someday. So I told her what had happened, and she said, why don't you and I work on it together? So we did. And then at the end of a year, she said, okay, let me send it off to my agent. She did. And the next thing I know, I have an agent from New York calling me and saying, I want to represent you. So all of a sudden I am like, oh, wow, somebody's taking me seriously here. I better do another version of this book. And my agent had lots of ideas on how I should proceed. Well, 3 years go by and I'm still making changes that my agent is asking me to make. And I said, Emma, at what point are you going to stop telling me that I still need to make changes? I think it's time for me to send it out, right? And she said, no, you are nowhere close to being ready. No, this is competent work, but there is something missing, and I can't tell you what it is because I'm just an agent. I'm not an editor. You need to find yourself an independent editor. I didn't even know such people existed. So all of a sudden, I am on the hunt for independent editors. And she gave me a couple of names. I called the first name on her roster, and a lovely woman read my book, gave me 8 pages of notes. I thought, oh, well, this is just lovely that she's making all these suggestions on changing my story, but I don't want to change my story. And she's not telling me that I'm ready to be published. So I obviously have call the wrong editor. Let me hire another editor. So I hired another editor, and even that editor gave me more pages, 18 pages, different ideas and different things that she thought I should be doing. And at that point, it was about 7 years into the first iteration of my novel. And at 7 years, I just thought, okay, if I can't get it right now, I probably will never get it right. So I just gave up writing altogether. I just put that thing away in my desk, my manuscript. And I thought, I'm not doing that anymore. And, meanwhile, I'm, working on my marketing and advertising stuff. I have a full-time stuff that I'm doing. So, another year went by before I was looking in my desk for something, and I ran across this manuscript, and I thought, oh God, I put so much of my time and energy into this novel. What is wrong with it? Why do people still think that it needs work? So I thought, let me read the instructions from those editors again. I read through the whole thing, and I realized that they were really just asking me for a minuscule tweak here and a little edit here, and, maybe a little more explanation on this side, just to give the reader more of a full-bodied experience of the characters. So I thought, okay, I think I can do this. It took me another year to go through the whole novel. Now, by now, it's like 9-10 years into the making of the Henna Artist. And then I finally sent it all back to Emma. And I said, Emma, you have got to send this off. Please, please, please send it off to publishers. Either that or just tell me that you don't want to represent me anymore. She said, no, that's not it. So I'll send it off. She did. And then we got a contract with HarperCollins within 2 months. And so now I'm writing the Henna Artist in earnest. And I have a new editor who is telling me to make more changes, one major character change. And so I start making those changes. And at the same time, I'm like, really thinking, wow, I'm an author now. I think I'm an author. I signed a contract. I finished the work. We have about 6 more months to go before my release date in March of 2020. And because we have 6 months to go when it goes off to the printer and it gets proofed and jacket cover gets put on and so on. And so Malik started knocking at my head saying, hey, you've got all that stuff in the Henna Artist that you did not include about me. Because your agent didn't want you to put it in there. Your editors didn't want you to put it in there. They wanted you to focus on Lakshmi. But there's all these scenes that you had in there with me in it that aren't in there anymore. Why don't you tell my story? Tell my story. I'm an interesting character. And so I started telling Malik's story. I'd gotten 20 pages into it, and my agent said, let's send this off to the editor. She did. And then next thing we know, we get a contract to sign for book number 2. And book number 1 is still at the printers. It hasn't even made it to the bookshelves yet. So then my release date is coming up as I'm finishing work on The Secret Keeper of Jaipur. And all of a sudden, let's see, my... all of a sudden COVID happens, and every single launch event that I have planned, every single book signing that the publicity department at HarperCollins had set up for me, any conferences I'm supposed to be at, everything is getting canceled, everything. And I just thought, oh my God, I just spent 10 years working on a book that isn't even going to see the light of day. I don't like, what have I done in my life to cause this tragedy? And then finally, I just thought, you know what? I just need to reach out to the most natural people that I can reach out to. And that is the book loving community on Instagram, because there is a huge book loving community like you guys there. And so you want to know about books. And I thought, well, if everything's shut down, then obviously people are relying now on Instagram to help them find books. So I reached out and I just said, hey, anybody out there who wants to know more about the Henna Artist, why don't you give me a call? Or if you got an e-copy or an audiobook copy of the work, please let me know. I want to talk to you about it. And people started responding. So at this point, you guys are my 745th group that I have spoken to on Zoom virtually because of COVID in 2 years. And, I just thought, I want to reach out to as many people as possible because the usual platforms weren't available, right? I couldn't go to my local bookstores and start book signing and all of that. Okay, so then Reese Witherspoon calls my publisher and says, I love the Henna Artist and I want to feature it as my May 2020 book pick. Well, that just blew everything out of the water. That was a lovely thing with Hello Sunshine. They were a great group to work with. And we worked on putting together a henna video with my friend Neha Asser, who's a henna artist down in LA. And we did cooking videos, and I talked about my mom's saris. I talked about her wedding jewelry. I talked about all of these things. It was really fun. And then pretty soon the movie people start calling, and now the henna artist is in development at Netflix. And Frida Pinto will star as Lakshmi. And I sold my option to them after zooming in with all the different people who wanted to buy the option for the henna artist. And I'm hoping and praying that I gave my option to the people with the most integrity, who will be more true to the character of Lakshmi and the story than other people might. Like they could easily turn it into, I don't know, Star Wars 15 if they really wanted to, but hopefully they will stay true to it. Now, let's see, I finished then The Secret Keeper, and The Secret Keeper becomes also a bestseller. And then I think to myself, in The Secret Keeper, I could not shoehorn Radha into the story because she's supposed to be in she's supposed to be in Paris at the time that Malik is doing all of his work with the palace and learning about construction and getting involved with Nimi, the tribal woman. When he's doing all of that in The Secret Keeper, Radha is in Paris with her husband and her 2 little girls. So I thought, well, now I have to write a whole Radha book. Otherwise, people are going to ask me, whatever happened to Radha? Why is she not in book number 2? So I was talking to some podcast or something about it. And my editor called and said, "You're writing another book?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm thinking that I better write, book number 3, and maybe this will be a trilogy." And so she said, "Well, send me what you have." I said, "Kathy, I have not had any time to write at all for book number 3. And so she said, "Well, send me a couple of paragraphs. Send me some idea of what you think the book will be about, a synopsis." So I did. I sent a synopsis to her. And then we got a contract for book number 3 all of a sudden. And I had not written word 1. But I kind of, just like with Malik, I had all these scenes that got cut out of the henna artist that had Malik in them. I also had a bunch of scenes with Radha that got cut out. And so I was able to incorporate a lot of those scenes in book number 3. So the book number 3 is about Radha in Paris. And then Nikki, the baby that she gives up in the henna artist, is coming now at 17 to find out who his birth mother is. So that's book number 3, and it's called The Perfumist of Paris. And last October, because of COVID, I couldn't travel to Paris to find out about perfume. I couldn't travel to New York. I couldn't travel to all these places, which are perfume capitals, and talk to perfumers and go to fragrance houses. But finally, last October, I had a chance to. So I went to New York. I went to Paris. I went to Lisbon. I went to Grasse, which is in the southeastern part of France. And it used to be a perfume capital of the world at one point. It still does. It still has a lot to do with perfume. That's how they make most of their money. And I went to Istanbul and went to all of these sort of perfume markets, where they sell the essential oils that go into perfume. And it was really fun. And because of all of that research, I was able to imbue novel number 3, which is, something I love to do, is to actually imbue it with real facts, real information about how perfume is made. And guess what? The major ingredients, the raw ingredients that go into perfume, are actually mined in Asia. So a lot of Asian countries are where sandalwood oil comes from, where, vetiver comes from, where, the spices like cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, all of that, it all comes from the East. And I don't think a lot of people know that. I think a lot of people just think that Paris just manufactures all this perfume. Well, they have to get all of those raw materials from somewhere that go into the perfume. And a lot of the essential oils are made in either India or the Middle East or Turkey, Afghanistan, Thailand, all of these kinds of places, right? And so I want the world to know that. And it's something that we're going to discover as Radha is looking for ingredients for this very special perfume that she has been assigned to design. She is going to go down to India and meet up with Lakshmi and the courtesans of Agra, who were the ones that taught Lakshmi how to make henna designs. Well, they also know about perfume because they use scents to entice and to seduce and attract their male patrons. So that's how Radha is going to learn a lot more about some of these scents that she is not aware of in Paris and in Grasse. So yeah, so she gets to do all of that, and at the same time, have the shock of her life when Nikki shows up at her door, because her husband has no idea that she had a child at 13. And so it's a lot for her to manage. I've given her a lot to manage in book number 3. Let's put it that way. So that's my story.
Wow, that was so inspiring and like so fun to join you on your whole journey. And thank you for sharing like everything. It felt like reading another book, but in like a different kind of wonderful way. Tiffany has a comment/question if you want to ask it.
Yes. Just because this really sparked my interest, did you like end up discovering a new favorite perfume? Do you have a signature perfume that you love yourself? I love just hearing everything, and now I feel like book 3 is going to tie it all up together.
Well, you know what is kind of interesting is that in the East, okay, so almost every culture has a preference for different kinds of perfume. Like, for example, in China, they like light perfumes. In the Mideast and in India, they like strong, heavy scents. And if you ever go to those countries, you will probably your tuk-tuk driver is going to have a very heavy perfume, coming from his, person. And then you'll smell the women with all the coconut oil in their hair as they're walking past. So there's a preference for much heavier perfumes, much heavier essential oils that are used in those parts of Asia. And then the Europeans like a very clean scent. They like for things to almost smell like they have no scent. And so they like bounce dryer sheets. That's the kind of perfume that the Europeans like. So I have always loved scents like coconut oil, like sandalwood oil, like vetiver, because I grew up with those scents in India. And I think they're just impacted in my DNA now in a way that if I ever pass somebody and they've got that scent on, I'm like, ooh, what is that? It's like when dogs follow people around, and I feel like just following my nose to what they're wearing. So I don't think I have a signature scent, but I'll tell you something. When I wrote The Henna Artist, there was a woman who is a scent maker. She was so intrigued with The Henna Artist. She loved it so much that she created a perfume for me, and it's called Lakshmi. Look, and she even put the label on, to mirror the color of The Henna Artist. And she calls it Lakshmi with Champaka natural perfume mist. So it's very light. It doesn't stay on for very long, but she put all the ingredients in here that she found in the book. So she put, cardamom in here and sandalwood and cloves and cinnamon and neroli and ling ling. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. Pepper, lime. She's got everything in here. It's lovely. So when she made this, I bought 300 bottles from her, and I just give them to friends.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
We also got another comment or question from a viewer, and they were wondering, what was your favorite scene to write in The Henna Artist? Because we had many favorite scenes to read.
I had many, many, many favorite scenes. Okay, so one of them was that scene with the Maharani when Lakshmi first meets the Maharani, and then she's got the parakeet right there with her, and we meet the parakeet. And then Malik is standing at the threshold, and he comes in because he's intrigued by the parakeet. He's more intrigued by the parakeet than he is by the Maharani, because Maharani is just a person, but the parakeet can talk. And so I love that scene because it tells you a lot about the position of all of these people within that environment. Here is this very elegant Maharani, an older woman whose husband did not let her, even with her wealth and position, he did not let her have children, because his astrologer had warned him that his natural born children will try to dethrone him. So he said, no, I'm not, not having, he had plenty of children with his concubines, of course, who cannot ascend to the throne. So, so she is somebody who has not seen power in her lifetime. And then when she is awarded this little parakeet, this talking parakeet, she decides to name him after her husband. And this is how she regains her power, because now she orders the parakeet around everywhere and says, do this, do that, go there, eat that, So I think, this is just a way that we learn things about her. We learn her lack of power, lack of agency, and how she is regaining it. And then we see how Malik, in his sort of servile position that he has in this society, he is not awed by royalty. He couldn't care less. He is more interested in, curiosities like the talking parakeet. He's more interested in making money. He's more interested in, how he's going to help feed the family that he has back in the Pink City. So I think we learn a lot about Malik in this as well, and what his priorities are. And then we have Lakshmi, who is, sitting down on the divan, on the sofa, opposite the Maharani, and she's not quite sure what to do. Like, do I reach for my tea? Do I wait for her to drink first? Do I? She wasn't even covering her head until Malik told her, you better cover your head, as a sign of respect once you meet royalty. And so there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty in Lakshmi's demeanor in that exchange, in that first exchange. But then she regains some of that agency once she realizes what the task is in front of her. And she thinks, you know what, if anybody can help cure that Maharani of her depression, I think I can, with everything that I know to do. So then she starts, gaining some more of that confidence in herself by the end of that scene. So I think that's one of my favorite scenes. Now the sex scene in the henna artist was the very first sex scene I had ever written. And it was fun for me to write, but not in the beginning. So in the beginning, I didn't even have a sex scene. I had Lakshmi coming to Geeta's house. I had her, I had her falling asleep. And then I have Samir coming up the steps. And then I paused. And then my next section starts an hour later. And then Lakshmi is putting on her clothes again. And so I was workshopping that in a class, and my instructor said, you can't do this to us. You cannot leave us hanging like this. And I said, well, I don't want this to be a romance. I never intended for this book to be a romance. This is a book about women's agency. It's not about two people falling in love. He said, well, I get that. But the thing is that even sex goes to character. Even sex, what people eat goes to character. What people wear goes to character. And how they make love goes to character. And we need to see her hesitation during this. We need to see whether she hesitates. We need to see how receptive he is. Does he stop it at some point? What is going on in this scene? You're leaving it all to our imagination, and that's not fair. So I thought, oh man, I don't want to do this. So I just had to figure out how to get myself into that mode, into that place where I'm imagining the two of them. And I drew a nice warm tub and, I got in it, and have my glass of wine, and I'm just like thinking, okay, now who's going to do what first, blah, blah, blah. So finally I write the scene, I rewrite it. I finally have it I workshopped it in my class the next time I was in class with everybody. And they said, okay, this works. This is perfect. Do this. So that is why that scene is in the, I never would have put it in the book had it not been for my instructor telling me to do it. And, you know, this is kind of, if anybody out there is a wannabe writer, this is actually, I think, a lesson in, you know, those who have been there before, those who have published in the last 5 years, they know whereof they speak. And so if your instructor says, you know, I'd like to see a scene like this, try it. That's the best you can do, is you try it. And you know what? If it's working, everybody will tell you it is working. And if it's not working, you're going to know it's not working. It's you will just develop a sense of, you know, trying scenes out and then seeing whether they're going to work or not. You have to write a lot of extra scenes than will ever make it into your book. And, you know, I had 140 or 50 pages of things that never made it into the Henna Artist in the first book. So those are, I think, some of my favorite scenes. And then I think the last favorite scene I have, and I love this one, I would love to see this one in the screen adaptation, is when Lakshmi is dancing around her room to say goodbye to the house that she has built and this beautiful floor that she has designed. And she's all alone and it's dark and she's lit the candles all around her room. And it's, oh, I can see it. I can visualize the whole thing and I could hear the music and I see her dancing to the music. It's going to be beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Just hearing you talk about your writing process and like unpacking the multiple layers of each scene makes me want to reread this book right over again. But let's talk a little bit more about your research and writing as you're talking about your writing, and transition into like some questions we had prepared in advance. What was the research process like when you were writing this book, and which part was most difficult and which part was most rewarding, in addition to some of your favorite scenes?
I think that in the research, I did a whole bunch of different things for both of these books. The first was that there are a lot of people still alive from the 50s and the 60s. So as I was going to India, I would just talk to anybody who was like around my parents' ages. Hey, what was happening to you at that time? Because, you know, my parents were in their 20s during independence, or in their late teens, early 20s. And so a lot of those people, they remember very clearly what was going on, what they were up to, whether they were getting married, whatever. And I talked to school teachers, I talked to ice cream vendors, I talked to, you know, people on the streets who are cleaning the streets. I talked to everybody. And I just gathered as much information as I possibly could about what their lives are like and what they were like back in the 50s and 60s. And then the second part of my research involved watching movies of that time period. And India, as you know, produces like 2,500 movies a year, every year, and has for decades. So there were lots of movies during that time period that I could watch to see how people were dressed, to see how men and women related to one another, to see what kind of professions people were in. Fabulous, you know, information if you're writing historical fiction, to be able to look at old movies like that. And then the third part of my research was to actually read novels that were written by Indians during the 50s and 60s and even the 40s. So there was a lot that, you know, there are a lot of Indian writers. If you look for them, if you do some Googling, you'll find a lot of them. And Rabindranath Tagore is one of the foremost writers. Satyajit Ray did a lot of beautiful black and white movies during that period. So I relied on a lot of that kind of information. Then I started reading history because my dad started telling me about why India was left in such poverty at the time of independence. You know, a country that had historically been very wealthy and had many, many raw materials to offer the world. And it was one of the reasons why all of the European traders were looking for the silk route, the spice route through India, because India had so much to offer. They had gold and silver and gems and spices. I mean, and textiles and beautiful silks and beautiful muslins, all of that. Well, this is why all of the colonists came to India. They wanted pieces of that raw material. And as soon as they had mined most of that and gotten it out of the country and in their coffers, they left. So when the British left, India had been basically raped and pillaged out of most of its wealth. And many of its industries had been destroyed by colonists who didn't want to compete with the fine Indian goods. So, for example, they didn't want to compete with India's textile industry because the British were starting their own textile industry in 1800s, and they didn't want to compete with India's shipbuilding industry because India's ships lasted a lot longer and didn't leak because the wood, the teak wood and the rosewood that comes from India in South India, those are very strong woods. They are like leak proof, whereas the European woods were much lighter and less dense. And then the third industry that they destroyed was the steelmaking industry in India, where Indians, all the warriors had these sharp swords and knives and things like that. That's how they battled. That's how they did battle. They didn't have guns, so they had a strong steelmaking industry that then was also destroyed by the British. A lot of people think that the British, oh no, they put railroads in India. Yes, they put railroads in India, but they only put railroads in from a major city to the port where they needed the materials to be loaded onto their ships. They did not build infrastructure from city to city, so it was easy for people to get around. So at the time of independence, my father was, giving me all this stuff to read about that period. At the time of independence, India had to decide, how are we going to rebuild the infrastructure or build infrastructure where there isn't any? How are we going to educate our people? How are we going to rebuild those industries that got destroyed? There was a lot to be done. And I think that was the hardest part for me in the writing and the research, because I wanted to stay true to what was actually happening in India. And I wanted to call attention to the world to India's plight during that time, because I think that India is misunderstood. I think that most people remember India only post-independence because that is how the colonists have written about it. The colonists wrote about India's history from the point of view of colonization, from the point of view of what they were doing there. They didn't write about India's history from the point of view of Indians being beaten and tortured and maimed and their jobs stolen out from under them because of all the industries that were destroyed. So I wanted to call attention to all of that. I think the world needs to understand why India was left so poor in 1947. And I want people to appreciate the fact that this is a country of 1.4 billion people that have to be managed somehow. And India's done a terrific job of that in the last 70 years. It is one of the few colonized countries that has not devolved into patriarchy, that has not devolved into fascism, communism. It has not devolved into dictatorship. It hasn't succumbed to any of that. It is still the world's largest democracy. And when I think of the United States, 325 million people, and how difficult it is in the United States to manage 325 million people, exponentially 4 times that in India, how are you going to manage that many people? You're always going to have conflict. There are always going to be competing positions and competing needs that, have to be compromised through. And I just want people to understand that. So one of the main things I wanted to do, and what I was scared about, is that Indians might say to me, this doesn't feel real. Your books don't feel real. They don't feel like India. You don't have a right to write about India because you haven't lived there since you were 9. And I wanted to never hear that. So I have tried to be very meticulous in my research. And I think I succeeded, because these books are huge bestsellers in India. And a lot of people from India, as well as from Pakistan, as well as from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and then all around the global diaspora of India, whatever countries they've settled in, they all ask me to be in their book clubs, and they tell me about all of the things that make them love India based on what they read in my books. Like they'll go, oh, I remember the way that we ate ice cream. I remember that. I remember how my grandmother used to teach us how to do these herbal things. I remember how my mother had to kowtow to my dad. I remember all these things, you know, so it's been a wonderful way for me to reconnect with my birth country.
Wow, I could listen to you talk forever. I
Me too.
I feel like when we were reading this book, we just got so much out of it, just in terms of like, I don't want to say history lesson, but we learned so much about history. We learned so much about just seeing how it was relevant to today, especially when it comes to women's rights and women's equality.
Yeah.
So kind of segueing a bit into our next question. The story highlights the remnants of the caste system and differing socioeconomic wealth brackets, with Lakshmi and the families of the Maharanis she attends to. Were there any specific memorable conversations or interviews during your research that helped move the story in its direction? You talked a little bit about interviews based off of our earlier question too.
Yeah. Well, I just I remember that that little tidbit that my mother told me. She said that, you know, before we left India, so my dad arrived in the United States to attend Iowa State University to get his doctorate. He was here for a year before he could sponsor us for visas, so the rest of the family could immigrate. And so we were here. We were in India with mom, and mom got called to the palace. And so she is in this audience with the Maharani, and the Maharani is having tea with these wives of people who are going abroad. And so I said, well, mom, what kind of things did she want to know? And she said, well, you know, she wanted to know where we were going, what our husbands were going to be doing, yada, yada. And so when she got to me, she said, where are you going? And I told her, we're going to America. And she said, north or south? And my mother said, we're going to North America. And my mom said, you know, I thought maybe she was going to trick me with that question, but I knew the answer. And, you know, I just remember that kind of thing. And I thought, you know, that was a Maharani of Jaipur who was very interesting and beautiful and very modern. And she started this school called the MGD school. And so she became my model for the young Maharani in the henna artist. And I think that was probably one of the more salient, you know, one-on-one sort of a conversation that led to a real character in the book. And I tried to, you know, change the Maharani in the book so that she's not exactly the same as the real Maharani. But, you know, the Maharani in my book is also very progressive and starts the school, the Maharani school. And just like in the school, the Maharani used to come and teach the girls how to dance Western dances, because she wanted the girls of Jaipur to not just be stuck in India, but to have sort of a global understanding of the world, to be able to be in diplomatic circles and be able to dance, be able to eat at a table with knives and forks and all the little utensils that go with it. And it was considered, I think, a finishing school in the beginning when she started it in the 50s. But today, the Maharani School still stands as a very, you know, big academic school, especially girls of wealthy families go there. And you have to have very good grades in order to get in. And then in 2019, when I went to India, I was asked by the MGD school to come and speak to the senior class about writing this book. And, you know, I saw that once again as a testament to they like the book. They understand the book. They feel that they can trust the validity of the history in the book.
That feels so full circle moment where like everything kind of comes together, and it's so inspiring to hear how much of your research is actually like translated into your own fictional story, but like still rooted in a lot of history. And you've mentioned earlier extensively about how Lakshmi is inspired by your mom, but which character, if any, do you see yourself most in?
I do see myself in Lakshmi, because even though Lakshmi's demeanor and the way she looks and her light colored eyes are my mother's, I also have light colored eyes. I also have, you know, these, they're blue sometimes, they're gray sometimes, they're green sometimes, depending on what I'm wearing. So I inherited those from my mom. And so I see myself also in Lakshmi when Lakshmi starts doing her business stuff, when she's negotiating with vendors, when she's negotiating with the builder, when she's negotiating with Samir. That's me, because I have had my own business for so many years and I have had to learn how to negotiate with people. So there are parts of me in Lakshmi, and Lakshmi's not perfect, and I am not perfect. I have made mistakes like Lakshmi has. I have, dare I say this, slept with people I probably should not have slept with. And this is before I was married. And probably I think we all have things we have done in our lives that we regret. And I think that that's perfectly human, perfectly human. We all make mistakes. We all betray people and people betray us. There may be small betrayals or large betrayals, but these things happen in our lives and they do shape us. They shape our character, just like they're shaping Lakshmi's character. So I think I see myself in Lakshmi. I also see myself a little bit in Radha, because I remember, in order to create Radha, I had to sort of channel my 13-year-old self. And I just remember being such a snot-nosed kid to my mom. For like 2 years, I was just awful. I was talking back to her and I was acting like she knew nothing and I knew everything. And, I just thought, I think almost everybody, it's hormones, it's, I don't know what else is going on in our heads. We just feel like we know everything at a certain age. And then we realize, oh my God, I know nothing. So I think I have bits of me in Radha as well.
That was so relatable.
Yeah, same.
Were you guys ever were you guys ever not good to your mom? Did you guys ever go through periods where you were like, she told me to do this, but I'm not doing that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think I'm pretty close to my mom now, but just looking back, there was like this period in middle school and I was like 13, basically Radha's age, and I was very much so a nightmare.
Yeah, literally me too.
Yeah. And you don't even have to be a bad girl to act like that to your mom. I was never, I wasn't taking drugs or drinking or anything like that. I was just rude to her. I would just she would call me because she wanted help with something and I wouldn't answer her in the house. She'd have to go looking for me in the house somewhere and she'd go, "I've been calling you for 5 minutes. Why have you not answered?" And I would just look at her like, what? Oh my God, what a horrible person I was. For about 2 years, I was.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that, and I feel seen in that, which is really sad because I feel seen, like you said, in both characters, especially now I'm like in my early/mid 20s, and then I relate myself a bit to Lakshmi in her own way, and then I see myself and Radha, and I'm like, it's such a struggle balancing both, but we grow through that.
Now, are either of you married? Or do either of you have children?
No.
Because, somebody told me that in The Perfumist of Paris, Radha is 32 and she is struggling with the whole work-life balance because she has found that she really loves working with perfumes and she wants to stay a little bit later in the lab and do the work that she needs to do. But her husband, and this, remember, this is 1974, and this is France, where they're even more patriarchal than, America. And so her husband is not liking the fact that she's spending all this time at work. He wants her home. He wants to know when dinner's going to be. He wants to know if the kids are getting looked after. And so she's really struggling with that. So friends of mine were telling me, I think this book is going to be really, is going to hit home with a lot of women of today who are still having to manage that issue.
Yeah.
So moving a little bit into our next question. In addition to henna, Lakshmi uses natural remedies to help women access abortion and improve their chances of pregnancy. Why was this an important addition to her character? And additionally, why was it important to show the contrasting perspective of Radha's insistence on wanting to keep her pregnancy?
Because I think, as my mother did, I really feel that every woman deserves to make her own choices about her life. Having a child affects the rest of her life. So if she is 20, 24, 34 and having a child, that is going to affect the rest of her life. No mother says, I'm going to stop being a mother at 18. And, when my kid turns 18, you're a mother for the rest of your life. And I think that, that is a decision that needs to be left up to the woman. There are women who want children desperately. There are women who want children but can't have them. And maybe, adoption may be a way to go. And I wanted to somehow promote that because I had spoken to some adoption experts in India who are working on the federal level to try to take the stigma out of adopting. There is still in India a lot of stigma about having to admit that you had to adopt a child because you couldn't conceive, as if it's somehow a personal failing. And it's, it never is. It's just biological, right? And then there are women like me who actually have never wanted to have children. And I want those women to also, like Lakshmi, to be able to say, I don't want a child. I want to do something else with my life. I want to devote my life to helping others, healing others, whatever it is that they want to devote their lives to. But I want them to feel like there's nothing wrong with them if that's what they want to do. And I think for so much of my life, and I've talked to so many women since this book came out who were in my position, who were made to feel by their own families as if there was something wrong with them because they never had the urge to have their own biological child. So I just want, women to be able to get what they want from their own lives and make their own decisions about it. Nobody should be railroaded into doing something just because it's not what other people would do.
100%. Yes. Standing ovation.
We were reading this book, and as we were discussing it as a book club, we were like, wow, this came at, I guess, sort of a perfect time. I think there's always a perfect time to read this book, but just with the overturn of Roe v. Wade with the Supreme Court, we were like, wow, this book just struck us at this exact moment in this month too.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in that ruling. And I'm glad that it's being left up to every state. Now, here in California, as you know, Alexandra, we're going to be okay because there are still a lot of abortion facilities and they're ramping up to accept more. There are going to be women coming from every state, to have their abortions here. And what really makes me crazy is that the majority of people on the Supreme Court making that decision are men. They have no idea what it's like for a woman to have a child, to be able to, to have to look after it, to have to decide what else they want to do in their life, what other passions they might have that will interfere with that. Oh my God, these are men who've never had to probably change a diaper in their lives who are making these decisions. It makes me nuts.
It is very, very, very frustrating. But definitely reading the Henna Artist during this month and during this time, has personally helped me grapple with everything that's going on politically. So I feel like this is really the perfect time to read or reread the Henna Artist. Loved it so much.
I have so many readers who say to me, I got to the last page and I started all over again. And, I do that with books that I love. I just start all over again. And there are things I get in the second reading that I didn't get in the first reading because I was so engrossed. I just wanted to get to the end and figure out, what's going to happen with everybody. So I hope people will reread it. The other thing that people do, which is really interesting to me, I'd never thought about doing this, is that they will read the Henna Artist while they're listening to the audio tape.
Yeah.
So then they get an idea of how the actions are being spoken, how the dialogue is being spoken. And they also understand how all of the names are pronounced in the book. So all the Hindi words become clear to them. And, I get to choose all the narrators, which is really cool for me because I want to choose the people whose voices to me sound like the voices in my head for Lakshmi and for Radha and, everybody. So I love that whole idea of producing the audiobook and then, watching people's reactions. And with the Henna Artists, we were able to, even with the audiobook, it went all the way up to the New York Times bestseller list. And I didn't even know that they had an audiobook bestseller category, but they did, because Sneha Mathan, who does Lakshmi, she does such a beautiful job. She is Lakshmi.
I love the audiobook. I lost track of time while I was reading it. So we had another question that someone asked, which was, do you have a favorite book and or author that you love and would like to recommend? So I guess we're going to segue a little bit into more fun, miscellaneous questions now.
Oh, I have lots of books that I love. For example, if you've never read The Color Purple by Alice Walker, you must read it. It is so wonderful. If you've never read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, you must read it. If you've never read The Kite Runner, you must read it. If you've never read any of Ann Tyler's books, like Breathing Lessons or The Accidental Tourist, please read it. Let's see what else. I love Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Just fabulous book. Could not put it down. And then this year, I've been reading lots of books that I just absolutely adored. I read Chemistry by Wilkie Wong, and they're very quirky. I read it's a book by a Japanese woman, and and Julie Otseka. I think her name is Otseka, and she writes beautiful books. Buddha in the Attic is one of them. She writes a lot about the Japanese internment in California. And that period of life, but she does it in this very elegant way, and it's really all about the characters of the book. So it doesn't feel like a history lesson. It feels like, oh, I learned something, but I was really interested in the characters. So, gosh, there's just so many fabulous actors, and of course, I love Jane Eyre. Let's see, I read a couple of really good books this year. Do you guys ever do this where, you just read a book, it's really good, and you're trying to remember the name and you can't because you read so many books?
All the time, literally all the time.
Gosh. I love Kate Quinn's books. I love, The Huntress, the Alice Network, The Rose Code. I love all those kind of female spy books. I think those are really fun. And I love mystery books. I read, what is it? A classic is Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow. Oh, that's a fabulous book. Just so good. So good. Yeah. So, yep.
Oh my gosh.
And then, there's a lot of contemporary stuff, and I wish I hadn't packed it all away. We're getting ready to do a big remodel. So I had packed all of my books away. Otherwise I could tell you exactly what I've been reading right now. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. I think we all really appreciate all of the recommendations you gave so far. But if you have any that you think of in the next
okay. My best recommendation, you guys, I totally forgot. And that's from my mentor, because I loved her book. It really got me thinking I could write a book like this. And it's called The Blood of Flowers, and it's by Anita Amirazvani. That is a fabulous book. That's 17th century Iran, and it's about a young girl who is a rug weaver and gets talked into a temporary marriage by, this wealthy guy. So it's very, I loved it. And I learned a lot about rug weaving in that book. So
we are definitely adding it to our list. I'm pretty sure Tiffany is typing all these down right now. Okay. Wrapping up, final question. What do you hope your readers to get out of your stories? And do you have any last messages for your readers?
I hope that every reader who reads the book understands a little bit more about India, that they have a wider perception of my birth country than they did before, that they sort of understand the humanity behind the people, and that they also know that, every woman deserves to have agency in this life. Every woman deserves power and the ability to decide her own destiny. And then I think just seeing me, I hope that a lot of people realize you can write at any age. You don't have to write right now. You don't have to become, big in your 20s. You don't have to, get all the fame in your 30s. Right now, you are just amassing experience. And experience is what helps you write better. Because the more experience you have, the more loves, the more losses, the more successes, the more triumphs, the more grief, whatever it is that you've been through, that's going to help you write that into the characters that you develop. And it's going to help your writing be so much richer. So don't be in a hurry if you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s. And if you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, hey, you can do it. You can write at any age.
As someone who is in my 20s, I feel so inspired. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for sharing your journey. And yeah, that's it from us. Thank you so much.
Oh, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I loved it. I loved your questions. And Alexandra and Tiffany, thank you so much for, being such a big champions of books.
Yeah. For those of us who are part of the book club or just joining in and don't know much about the book club, Subtle Asian Book Club is a club dedicated to reading books by Asian authors. And for the month of July, we're reading Once Upon a K-Prom, and we hopefully will be having an author interview and discussion on YouTube as well. And then also be sure to check out Alka Joshi's future books on her Instagram and Twitter and online. And yeah, we're so excited to read all of your other books. And thank you again for joining us. And yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.